Starting the recording now. But let me share my screen here. Our agenda, basically just wanted to quickly review strategic planning process, what next week's retreat agenda will look like, then get some input from you on if we need to add to our list of plans that we will be cross-referencing and drawing from. We have a list of regional local plans that we have kind of done a brief overview of already, but in case we missed any during our regional summary phase, then outreach, all of those workshops that Steve mentioned. We've got a lot already, and we've got a big list of people we're targeting already, but there's only so many hours in the day. So if you all think we need to prioritize specific groups or people, we'd love some input on that. And then looking at the project criteria that the state finally gave us about 6 weeks ago for both catalyst and implementation funding. So the event next week will be in Kings Beach, the North Lake Tahoe Event Center. I hope all of you can make it or have someone from your orgs there. Day one is the strategic planning workshop. We've got our consultants from Agnew Beck leading a great program all day where we're reviewing and providing input on goals and doing a lot of project ideation work as well. And that will be for everyone. The collaborative is the phrase that's being used now. And also just anyone, we've invited basically as many people as we can find and get a hold of. And then day two on Friday is kind of the HR, formerly the HRTC, now just the council. And we'll be having them at the first few hours, everyone is available to come through and kind of review the work from the previous day and prioritize the outcomes. And then we'll be going into like a mini closed session with the council to actually have them vote on some of those priorities. And then after that big event next week, then our team goes heads down and works on drafting an actual document for people to look at. And we've got those CBO workshops, the industry workshops, and then we'll have a public review period in June. So, hang on, I'm already losing track of where I am. Yeah, so here is a kind of a quick draft timeline. Strategy workshops here. We've got the workshops in May and June. We're going to have the whole collaborative review, all of that, as well as some additional items in kind of the midsummer. And then the plan, really, is to issue an RFP for catalyst funding in September, close it in October, and then have the council vote on project batches late in this year. That is independent from the implementation funding because we get to control catalyst. Implementation is coming in 3 phases, all controlled by the state. They are still saying there will be an implementation RFP is it late summer, Erica? Is that what they're still saying?
We're expecting it to be released in September. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And let me give you 2 quick updates on the catalyst or the strategic planning process and the catalyst, or rather the implementation funding that I think actually David and Jen have both mentioned in separate conversations. So number one, we have requested that the strategic planning process be extended beyond August 30th. However, I have to honestly tell you, I do not believe that's going to happen. I think because there are 13 collaboratives working across the state, at different levels of kind of completeness, and because the state feels they have a statutory requirement to actually get this first round of funding done by the end of this year. It would likely require a budget line item in order to extend the funding date for the phase one planning phase of this process. And believe it or not, getting a line in the budget at this point is probably an extremely difficult thing to do. And it also might be a little bit risky considering the state's massive budget deficit to try to do that. So we will continue to request that from our state team, but I'm not sure what the outcome will be. And then the second update is that I think some of you know that the implementation pot of funding, which was roughly $300 million, has been split into 2 years. So this was as a result of that budget deficit. We're anticipating that the implementation funding will come out in 2 separate rounds of funding, one in likely early 2025 and one then in early 2026. So, and we are working assiduously to make sure that that does not get halted if there is a freeze in programming. The good news is that it was already appropriated technically. So they're really just delaying the appropriation, right? So I don't think it can be swept or taken away, but it could be delayed. So, Amanda?
Yeah, I guess in regards to that, I was just wondering if the funding for this comes from the state general fund? Is that
Yes,
where?
it does.
Okay.
Originally, the funding for the overall program came from the American Rescue Plan, but the state shifted it to the general fund because the rescue plan didn't have broad enough parameters for its use. So it is general fund money. So, okay, sorry, Eric, didn't mean to divert you.
No worries. So when it comes to planning, in an effort to not duplicate work that has already been done, here is kind of the list of plans within our region that we kind of briefly looked over for the purposes of the summary to kind of just give a state of things. The first column is really is the list. The whole rest of it is slightly less relevant to the conversation right now because that's just what we looked over and saw as the various themes where we've got like the 5 industry sectors that we've established as kind of our priority targets: community healthcare, sustainable recreation, working lands, agriculture, and resilient energy. And then also kind of just the other general themes that people have been calling out, even if California Jobs First itself might not be able to provide funding for that, such as broadband, housing, and then also just more general themes like workforce development and small business development. In terms of the actual list, we've got the kind of the regional stuff like the 3 SEDs from the Eastern Sierra, Central Sierra, and Bishop Paiute, the ESSRP Sustainable Recreation and Tourism Initiative plans, our very own Small Business Resource Development Center business plan, the 6, why is Inyo not in here? That might just be a copy paste error on my part. The strategic plans from the counties, and then several of the cities. So we've got kind of the regional stuff, the county level, and then the cities. Is there anything obvious that people are aware of that that we did not look at for this purposes that we should look at when drafting the actual regional plan document? And
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be helpful or not, but what about the different forest plans? Because they do have an effect on some of the things we can do. Some of them are terribly out of date. I know the Humboldt-Tioga is at least 35 years old, although there have been some amendments along the way. Inyo National Forest, I believe, is almost up to date. I think they completed theirs last year. They updated theirs last year. So
Yeah, there was an update. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's going to be helpful, or that's just going to bog us down in a lot of reading nobody wants to do.
Well, I think the purpose of identifying the plans is to look at their goals, strategies, and implementation actions, and then crosswalk them with those in our strategic plan in order to see where there are opportunities for kind of coordination, right? So, I don't think it requires reading the entire forest plan to get to those pieces of it. And I think that's kind of how we would look at some of these other documents. And I also I'll note at the same time that we're looking at locally generated documents, we are of course looking at the whole plethora of state documents as well that lay out strategies for the region, including the scoping plan, the wildfire task force plan, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy strategic plan, the goods movement plan. There's a whole slew of state planning documents as well that we're going to be cross-referencing with the strategic plan.
Or
Yeah,
Michael, or oh, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I know. I think that makes sense, Steve. You know, look at the highlights in the National Forest plans, and if they're out of date, unfortunately, the Forest Service is still stuck with whatever it says in there until they get updated. But if they're really out of date, probably it's a plan you can skip.
We have in Inyo County, we've got our ag economic plan. I wonder if I'll get it to Elaine. We're actually doing some work and we'll be updating that, but we've got an economic plan for agriculture and working lands. Yeah, so I might get that sent to you.
That would be great, Jen. I'm wondering if there are recreation planning documents that cover the west slope. The east slope, we have a pretty strong, solid group, but on the west slope, I'm not sure if a similar analysis has been done of the recreational assets and amenities and other things.
Caltrans has a bike and alternate transportation plan, I think it's called. I know District 10 has one which includes both the east and the west side, but it's mostly people on the west side that participate in that. Haven't quite got the name yet, but if you want, I can. What's his name? Mark Schwartz, who's on one of the committees. He participates in that and can give you the contact information, let you know.
If you could get us the contact, that would be great. The Caltrans, either alternative transportation or their mobility plans would be kind of helpful. And by the way, Eric, there's one of those for Highway 395 as well that we worked on several years ago with Design Workshop that identifies mobility objectives for the towns along the 395 corridor. So Bishop, Lone Pine, Big Pine, Independence, Olancha.
Right.
I think it only covers Mono and Inyo.
I'm not aware of a recreation assets plan for Calaveras County, but the county would be the right person to ask for that. Probably Kathy Galino at Calaveras County. I do know that the Parks Committee is they have several workshops they're doing right now. They're trying to develop a new plan for recreational parks in Calaveras County. So that effort's underway right now. But I don't know of a broader effort than that.
Another broad effort that's out there that might, I'm not sure it's going to be useful actually, but nevertheless, I'll throw it out there anyways, is Visit California. They're in the process of a planning process for the entire state, and we're part of, I can't remember what region it's called, but it doesn't exactly override this California Jobs First region, but it's mostly overrides it.
I think we're split between High Sierra and Gold Country, their regions as they're defined.
Yeah.
And Jen, ironically, I think Inyo and Mono are in the High Sierra region.
Yeah, you know, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
Which
You know,
if
it's
you
just
ever go to Death Valley,
right, right.
Amanda, are you aware of anything on the resource conservation side of things that you think we should look at?
Yeah, I've been trying to look to see if I can have anything to throw in the chat, but I have some notes of who to ask at the county level. I know that we've done some like local hazard mitigation planning recently that's finished, and I don't know if that would be helpful, or CAL FIRE just finished their strategic plan for the Amador El Dorado unit just recently. So I don't know. I'm still trying to orient myself in how what exactly y'all are looking for in that regard, if that would be helpful. We don't have a climate action plan in Amador County, but I know Tuolumne does. I don't know if that would also could potentially be what y'all are looking for.
yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Amanda. We should be cross-referencing the climate action plans and the energy action plans, because those will inform the strategies for the clean energy sector that we're anticipating within this. So, and then I know it has not been updated in a very long time, but the state's bioenergy and biomass strategy, I think is still relevant, since one of the sectors we're looking at is working lands and working lands management. So.
One of the documents I've been looking at recently, Mariposa County has a recreation and resiliency plan that's quite interesting.
Yeah, we worked on that with design work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's that. And Nevada County is doing one based on that model right now as well. So good point.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, although it's not one of the sectors likely in the strategic plan, two issues have consistently come up as kind of underpinnings of economic development that we need to be looking at: land tenure and housing. So there was many years ago a land tenure report in the Eastern Sierra, which I think is kind of out of date. But you know, I think if anyone's done any analysis of land availability for economic development purposes within the region, that would be super helpful. And cross-referencing the local housing plans, if they've been done, would be helpful as well. So I know that Mono County is working on one right now. The town of Mammoth Lakes has one. I believe the city of Sonora has one, but I'm wondering if any of the counties have done any large-scale work on housing needs assessments above and beyond the housing element of their general plans. Because that we will look at the housing elements of the general plans, because that will give us a good baseline of like what is according to HCD required, right? But a housing needs analysis is actually a kind of a different strategy and approach. It's based on employment and other things. So if anyone's aware of any of the housing plans in the region, that would be very helpful.
Well, I can tell you that Alpine County wants to do it, but has made no progress whatsoever so far.
I'm sorry, David, who wants to do it?
Alpine County. But we've made no progress whatsoever. It's just words at the moment.
Yeah, and Steve, you mentioned a moment ago, housing lands or lands inventory. Is that what you said? I actually have one for Mono County. Mono County hired a consultant. I've had a business in Mono County for 45 years. So Mono County hired a consultant a couple of years ago and put together a housing lands inventory. We have one as well in Inyo, but it's rudimentary. It doesn't have a lot of data or analysis, just locations and yeah, just locations and data, like assessor's office data. So I don't know if
Well,
that's
I
even...
think that would be super, like, I think that would be super helpful because, like, somewhere in this strategic plan, we have got to answer the question that if implementation funding can't be used for infrastructure, for housing, what are the strategies that will actually advance the housing goals that need to be deployed in the region, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we've heard consistently across the region that without housing, we can't have economic development, right?
Yeah, sure.
There's another thing that in the social element of the summary report that was done, it was really clear that um, the education of our young people is not good. You know, we talk about more community colleges, but if kids are not graduating from high school, there's no point having a community college. And it's partly a culture problem. Um, you know, some families, a lot of compared to the rest of the state, um, a lot of the families here in the Eastern Sierra region don't value education, and so the kids don't get incentives to take it seriously and graduate at least from high school. You know, we can't get high-paying jobs unless we get a certain level of education to the public.
Well, David, I want to add on to that. There's been a lot of talk in this committee about the K through 16 program or whatever that is, and there has been talk, and I know there was an education subcommittee. But I'll tell you what, one of the things we're desperately missing in Inyo County is the fact that, I mean, I talked to a lot of the schools, particularly outside of Bishop, a lot of our unincorporated communities and their schools. The teachers are looking for places to send kids that is not college, right? So trade schools, vocational schools, internships. And when we talk about jobs, those are the jobs that we need in the Eastern Sierra. When we have a construction project, we can't call Stockton and bring someone up to the foothills an hour away, or like you guys, maybe it's difficult for you as well. You're out there too, but I mean, Carson City and Reno aren't too far away. We can't get people. They have to come from Reno or Carson City or Los Angeles area or even the Central Valley. So we need tradespeople, and we have students who are not college inclined. And I hear you on the education piece. It has to be valued. But I have teachers and students who will tell you they just don't want to do it. They want to do stuff with their hands. And especially our tribal kids, they want to go do stuff. And you put a hammer in their hand, teach them how to hang drywall or do roofing, or put a welder and a mentor with them in an apprenticeship program. That's a huge need we have.
No,
So,
maybe I wasn't very clear. People don't have to go to college or university to be productive. There's nothing wrong with, high school having a trades program. Certainly, like when I went to high school, which is a while ago, um, you know, yes, you learned there was an option to go into auto mechanics, welding, pipe fitting, plumbing,
Yeah.
electricians. All those are decent paying jobs. But if the kids and their families don't value that opportunity, it's not going to happen. And I think, I don't know, everywhere, like some kids is 15 years old, not very happy with the high school. I mean, do they have the options to um, go into a trades program, or is there an apprenticeship program that they can have? The building trades, for example, have apprenticeship programs. Unfortunately, it's in Reno here.
Right.
But you know, it's paid. The kids, you know, if somebody wants to be a carpenter, they can go to the Building Trades Council and get sponsored for an apprenticeship, and they earn money while they're learning.
Yeah.
So Eric, my recommendation on this would be that we have a one-on-one conversation with Aaron Wilcher, who before he moved over to the Eastern Sierra with UC Co-op, actually ran the Del Rio, or is it Del Rio College Center of Excellence, which did assessments of workforce education and training programs across the state. He's going to know where all of these assessments exist. I think this 7-county region is in multiple different regions that they've done assessments in. So I do think we should aggregate together the assessments that have been done for the community college districts of the workforce education and training and the trades training programs that are out there. Yeah, I kind of feel for you guys that, like, for many of those trade programs, you do need to go to Stockton or to Carson or someplace like that. But for some of them, you don't. So I think we could work on pulling together what are all the trade and technical training programs that exist in the region. And that should get kind of identified in each one of those 5 industry sectors that are anticipated in the strategic plan.
So,
But Aaron is an expert on this, Eric.
Aaron Wilcher? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah,
on the
you.
Business, Workforce, and Education Subcommittee. So,
Yeah, and I think he's coming to the strategic workshop as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good thoughts.
unless there's anything else burning on this topic, I think I would like to move over to the individual priority outreach question. On my screen here. So on the list of like workshops that we've set up already, we've got a few on the east side. We've got the Mammoth, Bishop, and Lone Pine Chambers of Commerce. We're doing a sustainable recreation workshop with MLTPA. Kara, can you speak to what we've scheduled on the west side?
Yes, so we're working with Amador College Connect in Amador County. Mariposa, we are working with Mother Lode Job Training Center and the Calaveras Mariposa group. In Tuolumne, we have ATCA as an organization that we're working with. And in Mariposa, we are working with the Alliance for Community Transformation. And then we are also working on the west side on some forestry industry focused workshops and as well as healthcare.
Aaron Wiltshire just joined.
Yeah.
He must have heard us talking about him.
Ears are burning.
So throwing back up my screen here. So yeah, we've got a giant list of people who we're attempting to reach out to in all of our various sectors. But there's a lot. So the question that we would like to pose to you is which individuals or groups are you aware of that you think absolutely must be involved in these conversations where we run the strategic plan past them for their feedback, and then moving forward into the future as we actually start looking at projects?
Yeah, so by a lot, what Eric means is that we have a very robust spreadsheet that identifies like 250 industry experts from across the 7-county region to recruit to these discussions. What we're kind of asking you for are if you had to prioritize the 3 or 4 most important individuals or groups within each one of these sectors, who would they be? Because there's a broad net and then there's a targeted net, right? Like, who has to be in the room in order to make this discussion truly productive.
Yeah, I guess I would just say for the sustainable ag and ranching piece, because we've already been talking about it, Nate Reed, who is the Inyo Mono County Ag Commissioner, and cover 2 counties at least.
Yeah.
And it's READE. Sorry.
Funny, I have the ag report on my desk here too.
There you go.
Is there a similar agricultural expert on the west side or entity? Like Amanda, is there a farm advisor at UC Co-op or a,
Yeah. Yeah, and I would suggest too, I'm not sure exactly who you want at the table. It sounds like a broad net. And one thing that I would suggest is really framing, if you're looking for, at least what I found, sorry, I'm going to take a step back. When developing these strategic plans, it's great to have, the industry experts, but as well having the people that are actually going to be developing the programs and implementing the programs. So I know, at least in our situation, when we get programs that are, especially on working and sustain and ag, that are developed without the frame of what actually happens on the ground, they become real skewed. So, I mean, from my suggestion, I would say the resource conservation districts and the fire safe councils. And I'm happy to provide the contacts that I have. There's also the Amador Calaveras Consensus Group.
Right.
They are actually a group of people that include the Forest Service and a lot of the other organizations. Like I sit on that between Amador and Calaveras. So, and they actually are implementing a lot of work on Forest Service ground and natural lands. I would say University Cooperative Extension, Scott Oneto. He covers most of our region. That's and there's plenty others, and I'll start thinking of names. We have our ag commissioner as well, Eric Mayberry, for Amador County. And I would say, I think every county has an ag commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to
Well,
say
we of course have
Calaveras County, Jesse Fowler is really good.
Jesse Fowler.
Yeah.
And David, we do have CHIPS and YSS in this list. We recognize that they're doing major work in the region, so they're on the list already. So,
I would also put UMRA if you don't have UMRA on the list. Yeah. So,
yeah, they UMRA probably could be under working lands too.
Right. Is there a agricultural tourism group within region?
The Calaveras Wine Grape Alliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be a good one.
We're working on putting one together, and I was just going to say, I think Aaron's here, but Elaine is working on a regional ag convener group, because there is a lot of interest. There's just not an organization yet, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of things with the ag tourism realm.
Well, Jen, how about practitioners on the east side? I know we've used, some farms and ranches as locations for, like Honeywell Ranch, and I can't remember that great venue in Bridgeport.
The Bridgeport Terrace.
Yeah, that Benny used to do, right?
Yeah.
So practitioners, I think, would be good people to talk to in that sustainable recreation and tourism area for ag tourism as well.
Sure. Our producers are really the people that do things like that, farm to table things or special events, but currently they're just not in an organized fashion around ag tourism. They're really more in the production mode. But that's coming. We're getting there. I could, like Inyo Mono Cattlemen's Association president, but Elaine is working on convening some of that. But yeah, that might be an idea.
Yeah, I think she's working on doing a workshop with them, isn't she?
I believe so, yeah. And then I was going to say fire safe councils is a really good idea. Over here, they're mostly volunteers, and they're all sort of stressed to the max. But one that's really good is our 40 Acres Fire Safe Council. and led by Kay Ogden, who is also the executive director of our land trust that works throughout Inyo, Mono, and even Western Nevada. So I think Kay Ogden would be really good in working lands.
Yeah, actually, we should reach out to all of the land trusts in the region because they cross over 3 of these areas, right?
Yeah.
Working
Yes.
land, sustainable rec and tourism, and sustainable ag and ranching. So that would be Kay and Bridget Fithian in Mariposa, and I can't remember who does
Yeah.
Foothills now.
We have Ellie Rout, who's the Motherlode Land Trust.
Oh, that's right.
Now, if you're going to talk about land trust, do you want to also consider, for example, the state Fish and Wildlife has a fair bit of land. Wildlife Conservation Board has some parcels of land. Do we need to bring them in? I don't really think they're going to be that interested, but I don't know.
Well, although we have a really good relationship with WCB, we could just like put WCB under the working land side because they could be a future funding source, right? So conferring with them on the strategies at this point might have real value, David.
Okay.
Like that, like they're one of the few state agencies that everyone funds. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And they also rob the local tax base, but that's another story.
Well, and we know them well. So
In regards to implementation, potentially the local Natural Resource Conservation Service offices implementing on private lands as far as work and coordination. And then as far as land trust, I know in our area, we have some California range land trust as well. And then we have the Amador Wine Growers Association. And then the farm bureaus as well would be great to include.
What was the second thing you said there, Amanda? Sorry. Before Amador Wine Growers?
the California Rangeland Trust.
There, thank you.
And is that still Anita Vale or is there a new director there? Do you know? We can look that up. I know people.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so, but I like that idea of the Rangeland Trust. And I also wanted to add Michaela Bornstein, who is the Inyo Mono NRCS RangeCon. We're in the process, the Mono NRCS, I'm sorry, RCD. There's a division in Mono County where the NRCS districts split, and I believe Northern Mono County goes over, maybe David, you know too, Alpine County goes east or west, I don't know, but Northern Mono from Conway Summit north goes to the Yarrington office of NRCS. And
east side of Alpine County is in the Yarrington office.
Okay. Yeah, and then the rest.
They've been very helpful after the town.
Yes. Yeah. And then our Inyo Mono, or our Bishop NRCS is Mono all the way down to San Bernardino County and Inyo, all of Inyo.
Hi, folks. Sorry, I'm coming in late here. I think is the prompt that you're looking for suggestions for both community and industry partners for these different priority sectors in the region. Is that correct?
Yes, like we've got our big, wide targeted outreach list, but who do you think we should really target to make sure that they're absolutely in the room for these conversations?
I just wrote down a couple things here on the ag tourism component, and there's going to be a lot of sort of overlap, I think, across these sectors. But our chambers, of course, and then I wrote down the fairgrounds. I think keep coming up in different regards. I think they probably could go in several of these different buckets. And then our county wildfire coordinators, which I think probably goes alongside the fire safe councils.
Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier, and I just know our county wildfire coordinator has so much on her plate right now. I didn't want to add this, but it did make me, it's worth the mentioning though. I did want to mention back to the previous exercise on the documents, I think many of us are in the process of completing our CWPPs, and there's a lot of working lands type projects identified in those documents, and that's what our wildfire coordinator is working on. And then in the resilient energy category, I keep thinking I'm on the government advisory panel for Southern California Edison, which hits most of Mono and most of Inyo. But they are doing a lot of work on the whole concept of microgrids in a couple of areas in our region, of course, hydropower, and then Matt Parolo is the government relations liaison, and he's very up to speed on a lot of this and investment opportunities and whatnot, and funding opportunities.
I believe we made contact with him at one point, but we haven't maybe closed the loop on him. Matt Periolo, I think. Is that?
Parolo, I think, let's see, it's P-A-R-O-U-L-O.
Yeah. There we go. Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you may want to include all of the power providers like Liberty Utilities and the West Side PG&E.
Yeah, I think our intent is to definitely do outreach to PG&E, Southern California Edison, and LADWP, and then figure out, like, I think the likelihood that their staff are going to participate in the strategic planning sessions might be low. We can try, but I think we're going to need to set up separate meetings with them once we've identified like strategies, goals, and implementation actions in order to brief them and see where our strategic plan goes, crosswalk with their either publicly owned or investor owned utility goals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The likelihood of them willing to get involved in the process is pretty small. Liberty Utilities sometimes surprises us with their support of the community, so that may be different than the other ones. But I tend to think you're right, Steve, on that.
Well, and ironically, we implement program for PG&E, and we can get to their people, but they seldom show up in a room to do planning. You know what I mean? So I'm confident we can get to Southern California Edison and PG&E. I'm a little less confident on LADWP.
In regards to
Jen, I'm wondering if you have a good contact at LADWP that works on government affairs or economic development that we could reach out to so that we could actually do a little crosswalk with what their strategies are once we have a more fleshed out document.
I do. She's out of town right now, so I'll call her on Monday and see if I can get her connected, you guys.
That would be great.
David at once. Amanda, did you have something?
Yeah, I don't know if this fits in with what you're looking at, but in our area on working lands, SPI does a ton of work and is actually, I'm sure in your areas too, a great partner in doing fuels reduction on their lands and partnering on adjacent lands. So I don't know if that would fit as well. Sierra Pacific Industries.
David, did you have something else?
I guess I will add, you all probably are aware of White Bark Institute.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got Laura Beardsley on one of our other committees.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
Thoughts on healthcare? We've got the Motherlode Healthcare something partnership on the west side.
MHIP.
MHIP, yeah.
I would recommend the Mark Twain Healthcare District. It's a special district, not the hospital. Dr. Randy Smart is the administrator there. He's good. And then
Dr. Randy who? Sorry?
Randy Smart. And then on the resilient energy, I think Phoenix Energy they're the developer of the project on our property here in West Point in Calaveras County. They also have small community scale biomass project in Eastern Madera County in North Fork. Greg Stengel is the CEO. I don't know if he'll be able to participate, but Jill Michoud, who some of you might know through ACCG or CHIPS, is a local kind of a grant coordinator for them that might be a good person to participate.
So Eric, that's the Wilseyville project we've been working with Greg on for several years to find funding for.
Okay, good. You guys know Greg.
So I can reach out to Greg and get him to get involved in at least this industry sector discussion, right? I think there are also probably between Jaron, Brandon, and I, we can come up with a list of 20 other biomass project developers within this resilient energy sector, although we might want to split this between energy efficiency and building decarbonization and biomass utilization because they're almost two different things. It's at least something to think about, right? High Sierra Energy Foundation has to be in the room for this discussion.
One thing that I don't know where it fits in this one of these categories, but was brought up at our local meeting, was water infrastructure as being a top priority for many of the people in the room. So I don't know if we want to add water agencies, but I'm not 100% sure which category that would fall under.
Yeah, that's funny. We just had a conversation about that, Amanda, about whether or not ensuring we're maintaining a secure supply of water for sustainable ag and ranching and working lands. Where does that fall?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, but even if we're talking about
land where we do forest management projects as well, I mean, you could put water in any one of these areas. Some of us have rec facilities. Some of us are hydropower agencies. So from a strategic planning perspective, though, it's hard to put us into any one of these. Well, maybe not healthcare, but.
Right, but if we're talking and on the level of course, with when we're talking about climate resiliency for ag viability, that's hugely important. But also, if we're talking about housing at all, we have to talk about our aging water infrastructure and just keeping being able to continue to be in this area and have water for day-to-day life, regardless of agriculture and industry. So, and that was one of the concerns that was brought up. I'm just elevating that from our local meeting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Water might actually fall under one of those things that, because it's ubiquitous across all of these, is an underpinning for economic sustainability rather than it's falls into one sector. So land tenure and land use and housing, water is almost core infrastructure that's necessary for any of this to happen.
I was going to mention workforce in that regard, Steve. I think in terms of cross-cutting, and I know there is some representation on the formal committees. I have noticed as I've been going around that our Office of Ed and the community colleges, I think can have, some challenges just in terms of connecting in, but there's a lot of stuff in the Catalyst proposals related to workforce, and so trying to figure out how to loop them in, I think, is important.
Yeah, good point. Actually, before you got on, Aaron, we were singing your praise as being an expert in this area and someone that we need to reach out to individually to identify, like from your previous work, all of the different kind of workforce assessments that have been done across this region. So I think that is yet another cross-cutting initiative, right? That all of these things depend upon a skilled and trained workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk more. I on the east side over here, I do know that there are specific like ongoing conversations around several of these sectors for like pathway and pipeline development. And some of them they're connected into the K-16 pathways, and but I'm just noticing there's potentially like some capacity and communication gaps. So that may be some kind of role that I could fulfill, like just identifying what they've got going and making sure the communication happens. And specifically, I mean like Saracoso, not to call them out or anything, but the partners are Saracoso and like Inyo and Mono counties offices of education.
Yeah. Eric, how are we doing on time?
We're officially, we have 23 minutes left. So since this is one of the homework items, maybe we can move on to catalyst criteria.
Makes sense.
So I believe I included the list of catalyst criteria with the agenda email I sent prior. Let me bring up. So please confirm, the state confirmed that these apply to catalyst and implementation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So just Eric, sorry, one quick clarifying point on that. This is the starting point for Catalyst, and it's the draft criteria for implementation. So it could change after the public comment period when the RFP is released for implementation in come September.
Right. And let's be clear about what we're actually asking for in relationship to the project criteria. So we plan on drafting a letter to the state commenting on the criteria from the Eastern Sierra Council. The Project Identification Committee has also already looked at this criteria and started making comments. We are planning on aggregating comments from the committees, drafting a comment letter to the state, and making some specific recommendations on the criteria. So what we're looking for from you guys is recommended comments we should make to the state or questions of clarification that we should put out there based on their draft criteria. And Erica, do you know what the deadline is for submitting those comments?
They said April, May, and we haven't gotten any more information. So I have a letter drafted and I can add in any additional bullets right now if you have comments.
One comment we've got is under equity.
Yep.
The first bullet point, disinvested communities. The entire region is disinvested.
So, David, one of the key themes of the letter is asking for clarity on that disinvested definition and asking for a further rural lens within that. And it's something that they've talked about, but we've yet to see something actually concrete from the state. So we're hoping that this letter will help encourage them to pursue that.
Also, another thing we're working on, David, is like the current definitions, the way they're interpreting them are that they aggregate together a number of different disinvested communities mapping tools. So there's a spatial filter for this, but note the language, assured benefits to disinvested communities. So the tool is not like the filter is not solely spatial. It's also based on who derives benefit from the investment, right? So the spatial tools are, the one we all love to hate, Cal EnviroScreen, but also the AB 1550 Low Income Communities Mapping Tool, the Public Resources Code Disadvantaged Community Mapping, the EDA Distressed Communities Mapping, and the Justice 40 Mapping. So by the time we get to the strategic planning session, we're going to spatially have overlapped all of those geographic definitions. And like I could bury you in the data right now, but maybe I'll just send you the links. If you overlaid all of those, probably 60% of the 7-county region spatially falls into one of those mapping tools, right? So the impact is, if solely looked at through a spatial analysis lens, the impact is less than we think it is because only 40% of the funds have to provide direct, meaningful, and assured benefit to disinvested communities. And well more than 40% of our region falls into one of those spatial definitions. So I
understand that. But I know that from all the broadband mapping that's being done, the Public Utilities Commission is using some of those same data sources to determine what is the disinvested communities in terms of broadband priorities. And at least as far as Alpine County is concerned, it's seriously lacking.
You mean the tool is lacking?
Yeah, well, what is shown as disinvested is not the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
And I would say that as a priority, like something that would be an amazing outcome of this type of group, I would think would be figuring out how our counties that don't fit into those disadvantaged communities, just our rural counties, the way that those tools are created, they don't take into account, our rural communities and how the difference of us versus LA. And I think that how we can talk about showing that disinvested piece is huge for bringing in state and federal funding. At least that's a struggle that we have had, and we're just completely left out of grants because we have too few people that are struggling.
Right.
And
well,
really quick, Aaron, before
that.
Yeah, really quick, Aaron. So Amanda, we hear you loud and clear on that. David, same thing to you. It's something that we've been advocating for, and we will continue to. One also minor note, the 40% actually is not defined. So our project ID subcommittee is putting together what that metric looks like. It could be dollars, it could be geography, it could be populate. Like we actually have the flexibility to define what that means for Catalyst. Implementation, however, that's going to be up to the state. So that's why we're putting together this letter advocating for that additional rural lens, because we are left out of so much, everything up and down the SNC region.
Yeah. But let me just give you a quick example of that. And number one, I don't think we have time to go through all the different mapping tools. Eric, as a follow-up from this meeting, can we send this group the mapping tools that you and I went through yesterday and today?
Sure.
I think that would be really good for you guys to take a look at because it gives you an idea of how these overlap, right? But I think another thing to think about in this is that if we draft that definition in a way that we're defining this as who benefits, a workforce education and training program focus, for example, that cuts across our 5 industry sectors, 40% of whom the clients are meeting one of the low income community or 85% below the state area median income definition or below, right? That would meet that 40% threshold. To be honest with you, almost every recipient of a workforce education and training program in this region is likely to fall below 85% area, the average of the state area median income. The region itself is already 80% of the state area median income. So part of the struggle here, I think, is going to be getting the criteria definition right and then designing the program so that the clients who benefit from it meet the definitions that we've set, right?
Yeah, I think, if it works that way, it could be okay. But for example, in Alpine County, and I think this probably applies partly to Mono County too, we've got a lot of second homeowners. And that doesn't sound like it's a problem until something like COVID hits and they all move to Alpine County for a
Right.
couple of years, and it distorts our medium household income. And then all of a sudden we don't qualify for a lot of things. And then now, of course, they've gone back to the Bay Area or wherever they came from. Um, and until the statistics catch up in 4 or 5 years, we're going to be at a disadvantage.
Can I just second that? And I'll add, David, thanks for pointing that out. I will add Inyo because of our land tenure issue and our little tiny isolated communities. We're finding that, our housing, we've always had a supply and demand issue. It's exacerbated significantly by the second and third homeowners, which to David's point really changes all of that. So anyway, thanks, David. That's a really good point.
Well, actually, though, let's think about that for a minute, because I don't know if we would have the ability to do this. But like Erica, one thing we might think about commenting on is that second homeowner dynamic within the region. Because actually, if you looked across the entire region, it's higher than the average across the state, even in the foothills. So we might think about how we seek adjustment for primary versus second home residency within the region, right? Like that skews the area median income any place where you have a very high proportion of second home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue here in Truckee, Tahoe area too. We're very passionate about it.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, and to the point of median income, I think it's a tremendous effect.
A quick question. And David, just because I know you're kind of a data person, what would be helpful for us if there was like some before and after data comparisons to show like how the numbers are being skewed, like that on that quantitative side?
It's coming. You asked me for some backup data to that comment I put on the summary report. And bit by bit, I'm getting you the backup data. And yes, there's a nice graph in there that shows that.
Great. Excellent. That's what I need. I need backup to show people. Otherwise, they don't believe us.
David, where is that data?
I'll send you the link. It's from one of the branches of the Federal Reserve. I can't remember.
Okay, I was wondering if the census data showed anything, but thank you.
It's really hard to pull stuff out of the census data. It's just about impossible for a normal person.
Yeah, and that's why we have.
And it's also done every 10 years, and then when you have anything that's interpolated or extrapolated, it's really hard to rely on like those metrics just because it's an algorithm.
Yeah. Okay, so two other things in this that we're seeking some feedback on are the equity impact assessment and the displacement assessment. We have no metrics proposed yet from the state for these. By the way, I think one place we might be able to embed that second homeownership issue is within the equity impact assessment, Erica, and recommendations for how we do that, right? But like when we're commenting back to the state on how we do an equity impact assessment to analyze the investments being recommended, what are the attributes that you think need to be included in that? Like, for one thing, I think we have to be able to scale it to the area of service of the project, right? Which I think is going to be somewhat challenging, right? And I think we need to look at like are the metrics quantitative? Are they qualitative? Are they, like if you were going to measure the impact on equity in the region, how would you do it? And I have to admit, we're struggling with this because we have not been provided guidance, So.
And so an additional struggle that so even with the rest of these as well, I look at it and I think of, if we're talking about improving ecosystem services for a watershed by, serving one, larger landowner or rancher, making that, is that what because we are talking about working lands and I'm guessing ecosystem service improvement. How are we making that pitch? Is that part of this impact assessment? Because I could see that skewing it if you're serving, funding one project on a landscape, but then having to, you get into, the all soil testing and carbon sequestration and all of that data that gets pretty complicated, especially when you're looking at an equity of funds being dispersed, can easily look skewed.
Yeah, actually, you just hit a really interesting issue that this should be measured not by who owns it, but by who benefits from it, right? Like
right. That you can be funding a rancher to do, something that would benefit a watershed.
Exactly. Well, and I actually think this will be more important when we get to the implementation projects than the catalyst projects. But like that is definitely going to be an issue. Like, let's say one of the projects was privately owned, but benefited disinvested communities. Would it count? Like, who is the beneficiary is a super important thing to suss out in both of these.
Yeah, it's specific, like if you're talking about increasing ag viability to increase local sources of food, right, and local commodity groups, you're supporting, you could look at it as supporting people that are making money, right? And like that's the whole point of this program, right? But it could skew it, but the end goal is having more local, a better local food system.
Right.
Yeah, over here we're calling it value-added agriculture. So it provides for the needs of food sovereignty, which is a big issue in isolated areas, but also disadvantaged areas, but also adds value to existing operations that can find that extra 10%, right?
May I just ask, and sorry if I missed it, just in terms of the feedback process here, we're doing some of it now. Will there be an opportunity to study this document and think a little? It seems, you know, this is something normally I just would do, my process kind of, you know, sitting in a room and thinking for a few hours.
Absolutely. Written input, really good. We, like, as
Okay.
Erica just said, like, actually written input preferred, Aaron.
Okay. And
We
and
love things in
thanks.
writing.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks for putting this together. This is
we do
helpful and
we do
thinking
not
about
know
prep.
yet when we're required to submit comment on this. We've just been told, what did you say, Erica? Sometime in May or June?
They said April, May originally.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to get it together as soon as possible for the implementation advocacy letter. So anything implementation related, send it to me ASAP. For Catalyst, we do have time. That's on our time.
Yeah. So really, if you guys are going to read through this and provide specific written comment on things that we should think about, either asking the state about or stating as a need in our region, we'd like to get it back maybe in the next 10 days, right? Because I don't know when we're going to be required to submit. And you know
Okay,
how this
great.
stuff works. You know, what we'll get is we'll get a notice from some state agency that says, oh, comments are due next Tuesday. You know what I mean? So we kind of have to start drafting this letter now.
So yeah, I'll send this document, including the pre-existing comments, which are in blue, as I'm sure you've all figured out. And there's not just this equity chunk, but there's also a climate chunk, which is shorter, but a little bit more specific in terms of how they want us to align with various goals and policies. And then there's also job quality and access, promote the creation of family sustaining jobs, with all of the aspirational goals about work conditions and scheduling and pay, and ensuring equitable access to quality jobs for communities throughout the region. So a lot of high level and aspirational language.
So yeah, and one of the questions that I want to ask the state in our comments is, what is there a specific tool we are going to be using to measure a family sustaining job? Or can we create our own definition within the region of what a family sustaining job actually is? And if we are we basing that on a living wage calculation? You know, for example, the MIT tool or the Stanford tools that are out there. And if we are doing that, can we adjust them for cost of living within the regions as well, right? Because I think that if you look at your typical living wage calculator, it really does not measure California very, very effectively because of housing costs and energy costs. Like, the housing and energy burdens in California are so much kind of higher. So we want to know, can we create our own essentially family sustaining job calculator for the region?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile pushing on that, Steve. Um, you know, some lower level jobs probably are never going to be family sustaining, which is why a lot of people have families have two incomes.
Right.
But the national stuff or even the statewide stuff just doesn't fit.
Well, my guess is, David, almost all 13 regions in the state are going to say exactly the same thing, right?
They
So,
already have.
yeah.
And yeah, the state's aware of it because even the Seattle, the MIT, none of the calculators, it's all based on a US average. And California just is, it's, it's an outlier.
We are just at about time. I'll send out the follow-up email will include those mapping tools, this criteria document with the pre-existing commentary on it, as well as that another way, if you have any more ideas on priority outreach targets or plans we should look at to give us that information as well. In terms of next steps, next week is the retreat in Tahoe. I'm pretty sure everyone on the call is either RSVP'd yes or no to that already. So I'll refrain from spamming more information at you, but if you do need any of that information repeated, just let me know or email me at surf@sierrabusiness.org. And we will be putting out information about all of our strategic planning and ideation workshops as they get once we get past next week. Which just leaves us, do you have any remaining questions or comments for us right now before we let you all go? We really appreciate your time today.
When you send out homework, are you going to give them deadlines for homework too?
I can, yes.
I really think we need to start doing that if we're going to get this stuff into the strategic planning process in a timely fashion.
Right.
Right. So
God, you're a terrible taskmaster, Steve.
Okay.
no, I'm just concerned that, like, I know the state is going to tell us August 30th is the date, David. Like, we've tried as hard as we can, and like they're not buying it, you know. So I want to make sure that what we get together has as much of this in it as we can get, and then we will continue to work on a process to update the strategic plan after the August 30th date. But I think because they have a statutory deadline, they're just not going to budge, you know. But okay.
Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone. I can stick around if you've got any questions, or I wish you all a happy Friday otherwise. So
Thank you all.
We'll get to work on the homework.
thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.